Eberta Foundation, as my colleague Knut already mentioned in his very kind introduction. I have been servicing also in the UK and in France, where I have been started to write also a bit more systematically about the future of European social democracy, because with New Labour under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown in London, and with the interesting phase after the electoral defeat of Ségolène Royal in France, it was quite interesting to see how the European social democracy was moving on, how it was transforming itself, how it tried to find a new paradigm, a new project after the visible demise of the Third Way project. So that's something that has interested me a lot in the recent years, and I'm still quite occupied with these questions. Now, to come back to the question that has put forward to me, how to interpret the electoral results of the presidential elections in France. Well, I think in the end it is more a thing between François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. It's a personality election and not necessarily a political watershed in the history of France. People voted against Nicolas Sarkozy much more than in favor of a socialist project. It's not nice to say, but I think any kind of electoral research brings these points clearly to the fore. People have been asked what were the reasons why you voted for François Hollande after the election post-polling surveys, and there was 55% of the votes that went to François Hollande, which were motivated by an anti-Sarkozy vote, and only 45 that were clearly designed as a pro-Hollande vote. Closer? Okay. Yeah, sorry. So I think it would be, we should not overinterpret the electoral success of François Hollande. It has had to do with the deep disrespect of the French population towards the figure of Nicolas Sarkozy, and led with the program of François Hollande and the personality of François Hollande. But nevertheless, I think in the way how François Hollande won these elections, there are some interesting hints for the future of European social democracy, for the kind of project that the European social democracy should put forward to the electorate. And it gives us an idea where we stand right now in the European social democracy. And I think we have witnessed in the last 15 years about 3 cycles of development of the social democracy. At the end of the 1990s, we had a phase of clear-cut ideological hegemony and electoral hegemony of the center-left in Europe. We had this pink wave of Tony Blair and Jospin and Schröder, etc. And gatherings of the European head of state and government were like family meetings of the center-left in Europe. And then during the last, let's put it 7-8 years, we witnessed the demise of this Third Way project, of this Neue Mitte, New Middle kind of social democratic project, with some very difficult electoral results. If you look at the history of the electoral results in the last elections, all over Europe you will see that the Social Democrats not only lost power, but they lost it in a very spectacular way. In many countries, they had the worst electoral results of the history or since 100 years and things like that. So severe defeats which show that there has been a clear disaffection of important parts of the electorate of social democracy with the policies of the social democratic governments. And now I think we are starting to enter a new phase, and this element of this new phase we can see with the victory of François Hollande, but also with the victory of Fico in Slovakia, and the relatively acceptable result of the Social Democrats in Denmark. We are entering a phase of reconquering of political power, but we are still in the midst of a search for a new convincing story to tell to the European electorate. There is no new project of the European centre-left that could play a similar role as the Third Way project of Tony Blair and Tony Giddens, etc., played in the 1990s. That was really a project that was able to convince a majority of voters that the Social Democrats had the answers. Now we are still looking for this project, this narrative. That's, I think, the phase where we're in. So then I would just give you some ideas where I think what would be elements of such a narrative, and then I'm going to finish. So first of all, I think we have to come up with some more convincing answers to the question of social justice and equality. Our phases of government in the 1990s and the 2000s have been phases of extreme growth of social inequality. In Germany, under Gerhard Schröder, we have seen an even steeper rise in social inequality than the United States under George W. Bush. So from a point of social justice, the third wave period has been an utter failure. And there has been this famous quote of Peter Mandelson at the beginning of the new labor years: we are utterly relaxed at the idea of some people getting filthy rich. That was the spirit of the third wave. And now we have learned on a very hard way that, first of all, the electorate is not utterly relaxed about some people getting filthy rich, and then that if for some people to get filthy rich, others have to stay poor. And of course, our electorate is essentially among those who have to stay relatively poor, and this kind of social inequality has to be tackled by intelligent political measures. We can't no longer ignore the distributional effects of capitalism in the same way as we tried to do it under the third wave period. So that's the first element I think we have to think sharply about. And François Hollande, I think he has made some very interesting inroads in that. His proposal to tax incomes over 1 million euros with a 75% tax rate has been a winner in the electorate. Clearly, that has been a defining moment in his electoral campaign. It was clear that this is a person who is not completely indifferent to some people getting filthy rich, and that was important. So then I think we have to come up with new answers to social cultural questions. Third way type of progressive politics has ignored social cultural identity questions to a large extent. It did not acknowledge that people have a sense of belonging and a quest for identity. We were all cosmopolitans. And well, that's all right with the middle classes and the educated people, but it's something which does not play well with both blue-collar working class people. We ignored that at our own cost. And most of the social democratic parties' losses in the electorate were among working class people, of course. That's where we lost much more than we lost among middle class voters. Social democratic parties or center-left parties today in Europe are essentially middle class parties. By its functionaries, by its electorate, by its representatives. And working class people are clearly underrepresented, even compared to other type of political parties. And that's due to a large extent to our underestimating of the salience and the importance of social cultural questions. And we have to come up with some intelligent answers to the management of diversity, which is on the rise in all of European societies. Third element, of course, is the question of management of internationalization. We have a process of globalization, we have a process of European integration, and we still have not come up with convincing answers how to manage this trend of internationalization. For a large part of our electorate, these processes have been accompanied by a loss in quality of income, by a loss in the quality of democratic participation, by a loss of agency over their professional, personal lives. And our answer is just to pretend that internationalization is a good thing. Is no longer accepted by an important part of our electorate. And that explains to a large extent the rise of these right-wing populist parties, which have made deep inroads into the electorate of the center-left, because they are much more skeptical towards these processes of internationalization, Europeization. And there we have again to find some more convincing answers. Here again, I think François Hollande played the cards rather well, because in he made his opposition to the Merkozy kind of austerity project for Europe one of the centerpieces of his electoral campaign, saying, yes, we are pro-European, but we are not for the Europe of Barroso, Sarkozy, and Merkel, but we want a Europe that is more social. We want a Europe that gives much more importance to growth than to pure consolidation and austerity politics. And here again, I think he played quite well to the mood of the French electorate. Another element, very quickly, I think we have to come up to with answers to question of quality of life. I think perhaps not so much in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, but in Western Europe, of course, we are living in some kind of post-productivist societies. People have everything. Their problem is affluence, not poverty. And the management of affluence, of too much stuff, too much things, is becoming increasingly important. And people want to have politics that allow them to have a more balanced, equitable work-life balance. All these questions of which part of my life I have to dedicate to work, which part of my life I can dedicate to my personal interests, to the pursuit of my individual happiness, will become ever more important, I think, especially when it comes to convince women to vote for Social Democrats and when it comes to convince younger people to vote for Social Democrats. So the question of in terms of the American Constitution, pursuit of happiness as an individual project for your own life becomes more important, and we have to come up with answers to that. Fifth element, ecological sustainability. We have to face a third industrial revolution, which brings our modes of production and our modes of consumption in line with the fact that the resources on this planet of 7, 8, 9, 10 billion people are limited. So this, at the moment, I think this type of ecological challenge is still seen as a negative challenge, how to accommodate to these type of limitations. But in reality, for Europe, it's a tremendous opportunity, I think. We are the continent that can deliver the technology for this kind of adaptation to the limited resources on this planet. So there is a tremendous dimension of growth potential in this, a transformation of the productive apparatus on the world. This means investment, this means new technologies. And I think it's one of the paths ahead that will allow us also to give a convincing economic answer to the challenges by saying we will create growth by this third industrial revolution that brings our way of production and consumption to the line with the limited resources and sustainability aspect. And last point, really, it's about participation and democracy. I think we have, what we see in Europe, if you look to opinion polls, you see that there is a growing disaffection of the way representative democracy is functioning. People do not feel represented. People do not feel that they have real influence on the political fate of their country. The degree to what people think that they can influence politics in their country is extremely limited. And so we have to revitalize democracy by giving much more direct democratic elements to the people, to give much more possibilities of participation at the local, at the regional, and the national, and especially also at the European level to people. If not, we will see a slowing, creeping delegitimization of the political systems we are living in. So I think that would be another challenge for social democracy. In social democracy, you have two words. You have the element social, but you also have the element of democracy. And I think we have, to our own costs, underestimated to what degree people feel not represented any longer, or to feel slightly excluded by the mechanism of representative democracy from the real decision-taking that affect their life. So we have to think hardly about more direct forms of democratic participation. Now, many of these elements were present in this project of François Hollande, but not very strongly. If you look at the program of François Hollande, you find some elements, but in the end it has been a rather conventional social democratic program, not many new ideas, not very strong and convincing new ideas. So it was rather l'art du saupoudrage en French, giving some elements to these, part of the electorate to these, but not a really strong transformative message that was in there. So yes, it can serve partially for us as an indicator where to go, but in the end it was not a very revolutionary program that he put forward. I think we have to make a bit more intellectual effort than the French socialists did with the last electoral program. Thank you.